Alright guys, I'm back with another video. So I'm going to show you one way you can handle widgets using enhanced input. It works under most conditions, but if you set it to UI only, if you set your player input mode to UI only, then it will not work. So I have confirmed that. It does work under game and UI only, game and UI or game. So it works under both of those conditions. So anyway, I'll go ahead and show you guys how to do this. So I'm just going to add the third person template just for the sake of this project. I'm going to move over to that map as well. I'm going to create a new folder. I'm just going to call it UI, and I'm just going to set up a simple HUD, and I don't need to do anything to that yet. And then I'll set up another one, and I'll call this menu. So I'll just create the input folder here, and I'll add an input mapping context. And I'm not going to create any subfolders. I'm just going to create two input actions. By default, they're Boolean variables, which means that the return value is either true or false. It's not a float or anything like that. So I'll just say select, and I'll create another one, and I'll call it set text. And then inside of here, I'll add a mapping for the select, and I'll add one for the text. And then on the select, I'll just set it to W, which is forward for the player. It moves them forward. This is just to show you how we can give this one more priority so that he doesn't move forward when we press the select button. And then I'll set this one to the right trigger on the gamepad. I'll set this one to the right mouse button, and I'll set this one to the left gamepad trigger. And then I'll just save that. And then under their input, I'll just duplicate this jump one, and I'll rename it to menu. And under here, I'm just going to add that menu, and I'll set this to tab on here, and then I'll just set it to the up button on the D-pad of the gamepad. So that gets that out of the way. Now for our menu example, I'm just going to create a border, and I'm going to give it some text. I'm going to center the text. Actually, I'm going to expand it across here, but I'm going to center it vertically, and then I'll just align the text across here. I'm going to set the border color to be a dark color, and I'll make it semi-transparent. And it doesn't matter that the text looks small compared to the button. It'll automatically adjust when we set it over on the HUD. And I'll actually just go ahead and show you that now. So I'll just set an overlay. I'm not using a canvas because canvases are known to be performance heavy. And then I can just drag this out here and center it. And there we go. And you'll see that it automatically expands to the size of the text. So I'll make this text exposed as a variable. And I'll actually make this menu right here inside of this exposed as a variable so we can get a reference to it from the blueprint. I don't need to focus this or anything, but I am going to set the visibility to collapsed by default, which means that it's not visible and it doesn't take up any space. If you set it to hidden, it'll not be visible, but it will take up space. So that's all we need to do for the HUD. I can close that now. Inside of here, I'm just going to delete this stuff, and I'm going to set my input actions. So on this one, it looks like I accidentally exposed the border as a variable and not the text. I didn't want that. I'm just going to reverse that. And I'm going to set text. And that's what it'll be set to whenever we trigger this button. For this right here, we're going to create an animation. So I don't use this because, and the reason why is because if you try to change something over here, it'll close this. And it means that whatever you set here will only be applied on the first frame because it kind of it screws stuff up. So go to the windows and you'll see animations and just open that. And this prevents it from being collapsed whenever it loses focus. So we're going to create a new animation and we're going to call it highlight. And I'm going to select that and you'll see it draws a blue outline showing that there's an animation selected. I'm going to go to add and border because it's selected over here. It shows up in that list. And then under here, I'm just going to change the brush color. So you can hold down Control and zoom in or out. I'm just going to drag the right side of that out until we have about a quarter of a second. We're at 20 frames per second, but you can change it to 60 or 30 or whatever you want. Maybe you only want it to be 20. That's fine. It looks smoother if it's a higher frame rate. I think from what I've seen, most UI animations are actually 60 frames per second, but it's up to you. But now that we've docked to this window right here, we can actually change the brush color from right here, and it'll reflect on this point that we have the marker on. And so I can come over here and I can just brighten it up a little bit. And now you'll see, well, I think we still have to, we don't have auto key set. So now we have recording. So whenever I change the value of this, it'll automatically key it down here. And now I'll just turn that off. Okay, so that's weird. Let's just undo that. Let's just do it manually. I don't know why I did that. That's weird. So I'll just brighten it and then I'll manually add the key. And so now it should fade. Yeah, that's weird. I don't know why I did that. That's so weird. It doesn't work the same way as it does in Sequencer. This button right here. That's weird. But yeah. So anyway, we've made our animation. That's cool. And now the animations are automatically exposed as variables over here. You'll see it right here. And so I can actually just drag this out and just play animation. And I could just actually place this down here. And we actually don't want these to be set to triggered because it'll fire continuously or multiple times. We only want it to fire once. So whenever we start holding the button down, when we start pressing the button, this fires only one time. So I'm going to set those to started and not triggered. and I want this to be ping pong. I want it to go back and forth. It's going to highlight and then go back, go dark again. I don't need to restore the state because it'll return to that state automatically, so I'm not going to worry about restoring it. And that's basically all we have to do on that. So we've got our test widget set up, and now we can come into our blueprints folder and open up the third-person blueprint. And I'm going to drop this menu input action here. And I'm just going to copy this and paste it over here. Since the AI can't trigger input actions, it's safe for me to just get the player controller right here for this purpose. Oh, yeah, right. So I need to get the enhanced input player local subsystem. And then we're going to remove it whenever we are done with the menu. And so I'm going to put a flip-flop right here. This little squiggly N looking icon. And when it first fires, it'll fire A, and then the second time it fires, it'll fire B. And so it starts off hidden, and then we set it to be visible. But we're not actually going to set it to be visible because we don't want it to absorb mouse clicks. At least not for this example. You could probably do that, but anyway. So, in fact, I might test that at the end just to see if everything still works. Yeah, so what we want to do actually, before we do this, we need to actually create the widget. So let's create a widget. We're going to create the HUD widget. We're going to add it to viewport. Otherwise, it won't be visible. And then we're going to store a reference to it. I'm just going to call this HUD ref. And then off of this, I'm going to get W menu example. And I'm just going to store this as a reference too. That's why I exposed that in the HUD as a variable so that I could grab it right here. So over here, I'm just going to set visibility. And I actually just want it to be not hit testable. But we'll test, like I said, we'll test that for visible and clickable later on. Well, I mean, I'm not sure if it's actually necessary to make it clickable, but we'll test it with the mouse not hidden. I'm not sure actually. I haven't tested it with the mouse not hidden, but I imagine it'll still work. So yeah, so this is basically all you need to do from here. And then it should, oh, I have it set to triggered. Yeah, that would cause it to open and then close rapidly. So we'll just go ahead and test it. Oh, I didn't give it a priority. Yeah, so you'll see it that when I press W, because it has the same priority, the other one actually took precedence over it. So we need to increase its priority. And basically how that works is like if one is set to 0 and then you add a second mapping context and it has the same key, but its priority is 1, then when the way that it's supposed to work is when you press that key, it won't trigger the other one. It'll only trigger this one. Now, I've actually seen in projects where that doesn't seem to be the case, and I'm not really sure why. It could have been just that somewhere else they were adding it and giving it a lower priority. That could have been it. Or they were setting that to something else to have a higher priority somewhere else. But anyway, so it's important that you actually manage these. And in testing, it's okay to just give it a random thing. But in actuality, you would probably want to manage the priorities and so that you can make sure that the one that you wanted to have the higher priority will actually have the higher priority and won't be overridden by something else. Otherwise, it'll cause a lot of problems and confusion in your project. Oh, so it doesn't help if I don't actually change this either. So let's go ahead and change that. So I'm going to set the input to be the menu on both of these, which I never did. And now you'll see that when I press it, it triggers the animation, but the character is not moving forward. And if I press the gamepad trigger, you'll see it's doing that. And if I press the left trigger on the gamepad, it sets it. And if I press the up D-pad button, it closes it, opens it. And yeah. And if I open it with the mouse, and you'll see I actually forgot to reset the value of that, and so it starts off bright. But yeah, so that's not a big deal though. That's just a UI thing. I can actually change that in here by copying that, deselecting it, and then pasting it, and that'll fix it. You see. Yeah, so that's basically it. Now, let's say you want it to be, so if you set the input mode to UI only, this will not work. This means that any bound input events in the widget will not be called. Yeah. So if you use this mode, I believe you have to handle the key presses using these functions right here: on key down, on key up, and on key char. You would have to override those and handle it from right here yourself. I'm not going to go into that. There is a video on that out there. But just know that if you set it to UI only, then this won't work. But you can set it to set the input mode to game and UI, and it should work even if I set it to focus on this widget. Yeah, so see, it's still working. And I didn't set it back to game mode. So you would have to set it back to game mode afterwards. Yeah. Yeah, so I was thinking you can also we could test this too, because I'm not sure if this will still work. If we do that. Okay, it still works. All right. That's the gamepad right there. I don't have the left button. This isn't a button, so I can't actually click it. But if I click and drag, you'll see I can still pan around. So yeah. Anyway, so yeah, that's basically the rundown on that, guys. And yeah, if you have any questions, ask down below. Just remember, if you set it to UI only, then it won't work. You can't use this method with UI only, but it'll work fine for in-game menus. So there's that.